Picture this. You are the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Your approval ratings are in the toilet. Your party is facing electoral annihilation in just a few months, and whispers of a leadership coup are echoing through the corridors of Westminster louder than Big Ben at midnight. What do? If you are Keir Starmer, apparently you call in the king. Not for advice, mind you, but to use the most sacred ceremony in the British parliamentary calendar as a human shield against your own MPs. Yes, you heard that right. Number 10 has reportedly concocted a scheme so audacious, so constitutionally eyebrow-raising, that it makes House of Cards look like a children's bedtime story. They are planning to schedule the King's speech just days after what everyone expects to be catastrophic local elections, betting that nobody would dare launch a coup when His Majesty is about to arrive in his golden carriage. If that is not using the monarchy as a political get-out-of-jail-free card, I do not know what is. Quick favor, if you are enjoying this, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Over 94% of you have not subscribed yet. It is absolutely free, takes 2 seconds, and helps us keep bringing you this content. Cheers if you did. Now back to the show. So let us break down this absolutely magnificent bit of political scheming, because honestly, this is a kind of move that deserves to be studied in political science classes for decades to come, probably under a module titled How to Use Constitutional Traditions to Save Your Own Skin. According to reports, aides in Number 10 have selected May 12th or 13th for the next King's speech. Now, on its own, that might seem unremarkable. The King's speech happens every year. It is part of the rhythm of British politics. Nothing unusual there. But here's where it gets interesting. These dates fall just 1 week after the nationwide local elections scheduled for May. 1 week. 7 days. The political equivalent of putting a firebreak between you and a raging inferno. The logic, according to government sources speaking to the BBC, is breathtakingly cynical and simultaneously quite clever. One source argued that it will be much harder for somebody to challenge a prime minister and say we need to go in a different direction when the king is about to come to parliament to announce what we are doing for the next year. Let us translate that from political speak into plain English. We know the elections are going to be a disaster, when no MPs will be sharpening their knives, so we are going to make sure the king shows up before anyone can actually stab us. It is like knowing your flatmate is going to confront you about not doing the washing up, so you invite your grandmother over for tea at exactly that moment because nobody is going to have a massive row whilst Gran is sipping Earl Grey in the living room. Now, some government figures have denied there is any connection between the timing of the King's speech and the local elections. They have said this with straight faces, presumably whilst keeping their fingers crossed behind their backs. Because if you believe that the timing is pure coincidence, I have a bridge in London to sell you, and possibly some magic beans as well. The idea that scheduling the most significant parliamentary event of the year for exactly 1 week after elections that could trigger a leadership crisis is just a happy accident requires a level of naivety that would make a newborn lamb seem cynical by comparison. But before we get too deep into the Machiavellian scheming, let us talk about why Number 10 is so worried in the first place. The local elections in May are shaping up to be an absolute bloodbath for Labour. We are talking about votes across England's council areas, including major inner cities like Birmingham and London, places where Labour has traditionally been strong but where recent polling suggests they are about to get absolutely hammered. They stand to lose hundreds of councillors, which is not just embarrassing, it is a kind of result that historically has ended careers and triggered leadership challenges faster than you can say vote of no confidence. And it is not just England. The elections will also take place in the Welsh and Scottish parliaments, and the outlook there is even more grim for Labour. In Scotland, the SNP is resurgent despite its own troubles, and in Wales, Plaid Cymru is making gains. But the real story, the elephant in the room wearing a turquoise rosette, is Reform UK. Nigel Farage's party has been surging in the polls across the country, hoovering up support from disaffected Labour and Conservative voters alike. The prospect of Reform making massive gains at Labour's expense is not just plausible, it is looking increasingly likely. And when you combine losses to Reform, losses to Conservatives where they remain strong, losses to nationalist parties in Scotland and Wales, and losses to independents and smaller parties elsewhere, you are looking at a perfect storm of electoral disaster. This is not just about losing some council seats. This is about the political narrative. This is about what happens when the first significant electoral test of a government results in them getting absolutely pummeled by voters. Historically, when governments suffer massive losses in local elections, especially early in their tenure, it triggers questions about leadership, competence, and direction. MPs start getting nervous about their own seats. Donors start wondering if they backed the right horse. The media goes into feeding frenzy mode. And most importantly, ambitious politicians within the party start doing calculations about whether it might be time for a change at the top. There has been widespread speculation that anti-Starmer plotters within the Labour Party may launch a coup in the wake of the May elections. Now, Labour is not generally known for regicide in the way the Conservative Party is. The Tories change leaders away, some people change socks, frequently and without much ceremony. Labour tends to be more loyal, more willing to stick with a leader even when things are going badly. But even Labour has its limits, and a catastrophic set of election results combined with continuing poor polling and policy missteps could push even the most loyal MPs over the edge. And this is where the King's Speech gambit comes in. The King's Speech is not just any old parliamentary event. It is the most glamorous, ceremonial, and historically significant moment in the entire parliamentary calendar. It is drenched in tradition, pomp, and pageantry. The king arrives in a horse-drawn carriage alongside Queen Camilla, decked out in full regalia. Members of the House of Lords wear their magnificent red and white ermine cloaks, looking like they have stepped straight out of a medieval painting. There is a famous scene where Black Rod, an official with one of the best job titles in British politics, is sent to bang on the door of the House of Commons to summon MPs to hear the speech, only to have the door slam in their face before being allowed in, a tradition symbolizing the independence of the Commons from monarchy. It is pure theatre, and it is constitutionally crucial. The King's Speech, despite its name, is actually written by the government of the day. It sets out all the bills, all the legislation, all the policy priorities that will be coming forward during the following parliamentary session. It is essentially the government saying, this is our agenda for the next year. This is what we are going to do, and by extension, this is what we are asking you to judge us on. Having the king deliver this speech gives an enormous weight and legitimacy. It is not just a prime minister standing up and making promises. It is a constitutional head of state formally announcing the government's program. And here is the brilliance, or the cynicism depending on your perspective, of timing it just a week after disastrous local elections. If MPs are thinking about launching a leadership challenge, if they are meeting in corridors and WhatsApp groups plotting Starmer's demise, if they are briefing journalists about the need for fresh leadership and a change of direction, suddenly they have to confront a very awkward reality. In 7 days, the king is coming to Parliament to announce the government's agenda for the next year. An agenda that has presumably been written in consultation with the current Prime Minister and reflects his priorities and vision. Launching a leadership challenge in that narrow window would look chaotic, disrespectful to the monarchy, and constitutionally messy. It is a bit like planning to tell your boss you are quitting right before they are due to give a major presentation that they have spent months preparing, and that you helped write. Technically you could do it, but the optics are terrible, the timing is awful, and everyone would think you are a bit of an idiot for not waiting just a few more days. By scheduling the King's Speech for immediately after the elections, Number 10 is essentially buying time. They are creating a buffer period during which the normal rules of political plotting are suspended because nobody wants to be seen as disrespecting the king or creating constitutional chaos right before a major state occasion. Now, you might be thinking, surely MPs would not care that much about the optics. Surely if they want Starmer gone, they will just get on with it regardless of the King's Speech. And you would be underestimating the power of British political theatre and reverence for constitutional tradition. The monarchy might not have real political power, but it has enormous symbolic weight. The King's Speech is not just a government announcement, it is a state occasion. It involves the Queen, the Prince of Wales, senior royals, all the pomp and ceremony of the British state. Creating political chaos around such an event will be seen as deeply inappropriate, potentially damaging to the plotters' own reputations, and would give ammunition to Starmer supporters to paint the rebels as reckless and unpatriotic. Moreover, once the king has delivered the speech and set out the government's agenda, it becomes much harder to argue for a change of leadership in the immediate aftermath. The government has just publicly committed to a year's worth of legislation and policy. The king has formally announced it. To then immediately oust the prime minister who crafted that agenda would look like chaos and indecision. It would raise questions about why the party allowed him to set the agenda if they did not have confidence in him. It would look amateurish and unstable, exactly the kind of image a party trailing in the polls desperately needs to avoid. So the timing is perfect from number 10's perspective. The elections happen. The results are awful. MPs are furious and plotting. But before they can actually organize a challenge, boom, the King's speech is upon them. They have to sit through the pageantry, listen to the government agenda being formally announced. And by the time the immediate post-speech period is over, the moment of maximum danger has passed. The election results are a few weeks old, no longer the top story, and the political conversation has moved on to the government's legislative agenda. The plotters have missed their window. Of course, this strategy only works if the local elections are merely bad rather than apocalyptic. If Labour loses so many seats, if the swings against them are so dramatic, if Reform's victories are so comprehensive that it becomes a genuinely historic wipeout, then even the King's speech might not provide enough cover.